Well, welcome to the Lucky 13 podcast, where we talk about all things people in profit and business. I'm your co-host, Mike Lantz.
And Josh Hauser, as always.
Joshua Sheffy Hauser.
That is right.
The co-host.
Well done.
So
well done.
So just
what's Michael's middle name first?
Christopher.
Michael
We
Christopher.
went over that. You don't listen to our episodes
but
at all, do you?
I call you the MC. I didn't realize why the Christopher
MC.
was there. Yeah,
Right.
see, I like it.
Yeah, I tease people that I own MCL Cafeteria here in town, but
You're
that's not
approaching
true.
the age, so that works out well.
Yep. So we, just to let the cat out of the bag, if you haven't noticed, if you watch us on YouTube TV, we like record 3 of these at a time.
Yeah.
So that's why we always have weird looking haircuts and same thing that we're
The
dressed
haircut
with.
thing came up. Anybody else notice the haircut? I go 8 weeks on a haircut. So
8 weeks on a haircut. I go like 3.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? This is what you get.
Do you get your hair dyed that color? I put in the gray.
Yes, I got 6 daughters. They do it for me. Works out well.
Yeah.
It's
So
actually the 2 sons driving me right now, though, and I hope they heard that.
we are recording a few days after Thanksgiving. How was your Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I was a weight gainer, which is what Thanksgiving's about. So that's awesome.
Stretchy pants.
Yeah. How about you? I don't look as good in yoga pants, but I tried them on, and it worked out.
I would not want to see that. Ours was good. We had about 15 people over, which I realize is practically the size of your household, but just family. And my wife bought this store, and so she's in the middle of the retail blitz. So I said to her, I go, I'll handle the food this year.
Wow.
For 15 people, I said I'd handle the food. You pretty impressed?
Where'd you order from?
Psalms.
Well done.
So I called up
Well
Psalms. We
done.
had never done it before. I'm like, I believe in outsourcing.
Yes.
And so I called them up a couple of weeks ago, and they hooked us up, and it was wonderful. And
So shout out to Sam's Great Grub.
it was great grub. All you had to do, I'd show up the day before Thanksgiving. I picked it up. I had a delivery time. I walk in. They go, "Oh, you must be Mike." I said, "Yep." They gave me all my food. I took it home, and I started. It's a take and bake thing.
Oh, perfect.
So you got to bake a few things.
So you
but
had
the
to turn
turkey
ovens
was
on
done.
and stuff.
I did, and I did it.
You're probably exhausted.
No, it was pretty easy.
Oh, good for you.
And then we set up the Christmas tree and all that kind of stuff
great
afterwards. So I
stuff.
had to get that done.
Great traditions.
But it was good. How about you? Any traditions?
You know what? We had almost everybody home this year. I went out a week early to North Dakota, spent bro giving with the oldest.
Yeah.
And then got home actually Thanksgiving morning. And then all the kids were home, minus Kobe, who's in the Air Force. And they had significant others at the house. First time we've had significant others at the house. And no fighting, no blood.
They all got along.
Yeah, the only mistake I made was how long are my, my mom and in-laws going to be here? That was the only mistake I made because I said it a little too loud.
Yeah.
I love them thoroughly. I want them to stay as long as they want, but I need that remote control. I need that back, especially on Thanksgiving,
football
which
day.
is football day.
We've expanded to 3 games, I think. It hasn't always
Correct.
been that way. It used to always be the Lions and the Cowboys.
Correct.
We added a 3rd game. So I'm curious. So you have 2 boys and 6 girls.
Yes, that is correct.
And so how many of your girls had significant others? I know some of them
Just
aren't old enough to have them, but
one had one for dinner, and then the other one had their significant other join us for what do we want to call the second dinner if you're a Frodo Baggins fan. So we had that later in the day. So we ended up having 3 significant others of the oldest of the older 4.
So how did Micah relate with the 2 boy significant others, knowing that you have raised them to be very protective?
Micah thinks when boys come over, it's a locker room. Let's just call it what it is. Which means
towel slapping.
I had this conversation with a peer of mine today that when he screws up, I get in trouble. So because we tend to look alike, Micah, we bring boys over. Micah acts like, "Hey, y'all, watch this."
What? You guys look alike?
Well,
I've
we're
seen
built
Micah
alike.
lately. I don't get it.
We're built alike. Okay, maybe not, but there is some similarities.
Okay.
And he got pretty wound up and got pretty in trouble, which just means I get in trouble. And so then I have this conversation with the boys every year. Please, please, please don't get me in trouble. Well, what do you mean? Every time you do something dumb, it's my fault. It's obviously my genetics.
It's always the parents' fault.
Yeah, of course.
For sure.
Of course.
All right, let's dive in here. Again, we come to you once a week. You can connect with us in a lot of different ways.
Yep.
We talk about all things people in profit, and so we thought it'd be fun. We had some people suggest some topics to us, and so we had 4 suggestions,
Let's see what
among
happens.
others, but these were the only ones that we thought were fun to talk about. And so we're gonna just grab one out of the cup and kind of go
what
from
happens.
there. See what's in here. I
You're a
hope
better
it's-
reader than I am.
Hope
so
it's
you
a
read.
good one. All right.
know.
Oh,
Which one is it?
I'm excited about this one.
All right.
I actually even brought I brought a prop.
You brought props?
I brought a prop. So,
not
because I
fair.
need to read some things. When I saw this one come through, I thought this would be perfect. The gap in the game.
I love it.
The gap in the game. So,
Love it.
So just kind of, give us a quick overview of where the gap in the game came from.
Yeah. So From my readings and following, this is a very strategic coach, Dan Sullivan concept, and he partnered with a guy who I think is a fantastic author, really digs deep into your soul, by the name of Ben Hardy.
Yeah.
And they co-authored a book called The Gap and the Gain. I can't help but recommend that to a lot of business owners of just thinking about that. And as it pertains to people and profit, it's a great fit.
Yeah. And so I ran into The Gap in the Gain. I've never read the book, The Gap in the Gain, but the concept of The Gap in the Gain is also in this book, 10X is Easier Than 2X, written by Ben Hardy.
Highly recommend.
And Dan Sullivan. Awesome book. So I read the book like 2 months ago. I had somebody send it to me, and it was awesome. But for whatever reason, this part of The Gap in the Gain didn't stand out to me.
Okay.
And so I was preparing. So we have our annual meeting, our EOS annual meeting tomorrow and Friday.
Oh, you got 2-day coming
Planning.
up?
Yep. Starts tomorrow. And so I was doing a lot of planning over the weekend of like looking at our results and things like that. And I got to be totally transparent. I was a little pissed off. Like I was looking at our results and I was like, man, I'm not feeling great about it. And then Monday, I'm driving in my car, and for whatever reason, this part of the book came up about the gap in the
So
game.
you're listening to it in the car?
So I'm listening to it.
Sometimes that
and
helps.
so let's talk about, and I'll make the, because it made me feel better about this, but we got to define what the gap in the game is.
Walk
first.
me through what your interpretation is.
Well, I'm going to read it.
That's probably best.
Why
That's
try
best.
to summarize it when I can read it?
That's best.
So the gap is a lens by which you measure what is against what could be. In the gap, you're measuring what is against what you believe should be. When you're in the gap, you're measuring yourself or your situation against an ideal. And so I started to think about that. I'm like, oh man, that's what I've been doing. Because what I'm thinking about is my buddy over here who has a business that's a little more successful than mine. Or I'm looking over here to this guy that gets to take a month and a half off of work, and he has a team that can totally keep things going forward. And I'm a little bit jealous about that. Or I'm comparing myself to some ideal.
There's the word. Comparison's the killer of all joy.
Right.
And the gap exposes that.
Right. And so I'm thinking about it from that perspective. So when I'm looking at the results of our business, I'm looking at it from compared to what I think the ideal should have been. And the way they unpack it in the book is whenever you compare yourself to that, you're always going to be let down. So I could sit here and say, I want to have a $10 million business. And once I get to 10 million, it's not going to be the $20 million business or the 30 million. I'm always going to be disappointed in that. And so I resonate with that. Then it went on and talked about what the gain was.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
And so, so they define that when you're
By the way, I'm really impressed that you got you to this point in reading. That's awesome. So
you're welcome. When you're in the gain, you're never measuring yourself against anything external. You're only measuring yourself against yourself or your organization, that sort of thing. More directly, you're measuring yourself against where you were before. While in the gain, you have ideals as well as clear and specific goals you're stretching towards, even 10X goals. But you're not measuring yourself against those ideals or even against your goals. Instead, you're only measuring yourself backwards against where and who you were before.
Love it.
So then it hit me. So then I went back and I looked at our results. Would you believe it? We grew 30% top line revenue this year.
But you were having a pissed off weekend.
And we grew 25% profitability.
Huh.
And so compared to what the ideal is, I was upset about it. Compared to where we were the year before, I was excited about it.
I love what you just told me. What I heard was the gap is this expectation that we have of ourselves. And the reality is we'll never reach those expectations because we have higher expectations than what we actually mentally can achieve. Very rarely have I ever heard somebody say they've exceeded expectations. I would always say, well, then we set them too low because there's more in you.
Right.
The gain, what I heard you say, is that you have agreements, and agreements are objective, finite starting points, and I agree that we're going to grow past those starting points. And you actually could look back and see the growth that happened. Growing up in farm country, that is seeing the corn at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and let's talk a little bit about where this can creep up in a lot of different areas of your life. So like one of the examples they gave in here, Ben Hardy was talking about and Dan Sullivan both were Ben, he's like, when I realized that I was operating in the gap rather than the gain, my parenting was different.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So you and I, high achieving dads, want the best for our kids. We met
at
football camps, right? And so let's talk about possibly the benefit of operating in the gain rather than the gap as it relates to parenting.
So I can use my oldest. This was amazing. We had a bro giving, And we had, I'm going to use this term, a Goodwill Hunting moment. And if you've ever seen the movie Goodwill Hunting, there's a moment where Robin Williams says, it's not your fault. And I had to have that moment as a parent, that I had to realize that I raised my son in very critical moments in the gap and not in the gain, meaning you were so much more capable of doing this rather than look how much you've grown. And because of that, we carry that trauma, we carry those thoughts, and we're always not enough, not enough, not enough. And just saying those words enough is important. So from a parenting standpoint, I really had this flashback to his freshman year of football. He's playing varsity football, and all I could think about is all the things he's not doing right.
Yeah.
And I'm forgetting he's a freshman playing varsity football at one of the best programs in the country.
6A.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, Josh.
Yeah.
Come on. And so from a parenting side, this has been like my moment for the last year of digging into, I got to quit living in the gap and start living in the game, which is, to me, is living in that future self and allowing my past self to be my lessons, not my mistakes. Does that resonate?
And the comparison, right? Like, well, why can't
it kills all
my
joy.
Kid do this and compared to that other kid? And,
this kid made 7 tackles, you made 5.
Yeah, why can't you do 7 or 8 or 9?
Come on.
Yeah, and so
give me the same.
Well, back. I think I've got 5 of the 8 in the equation, and I think it shows up the exact same way. Especially like I have a son Mason who has my athletic gifts, which aren't much, and so he's always been really into business and things like that. And it's really easy because I'm in business to evaluate him in the gap rather than the gain. And I have to remember back when I was 18, 20, 21. He's 22 now. Like, shit, he crushes me. His 21 is way better than my 21. But we oftentimes don't think about it from that perspective. We don't go back and think about it, and then we don't think about all the gains that they've really made.
My wife and I had this in a driving moment. She was an amazing swimmer, school record holder, state qualifier, amazing swimmer. Could have swam anywhere in most places in the country. I was a college basketball player. We don't have a swimmer or a basketball player in the house.
Yeah.
That is us treating those sports that they all started in the gap mentality. And I would argue that they went to gymnastics and to track and to football because that was their gain. There is no comparison with mom and dad in those sports. And it's funny that you can look back on that. That's why they went there. And that was actually me. Yeah. I was coaching, teaching, being a leader of my household, being a leader of a company in the gap mentality. When the reality is, if I would have lived in the gain mentality, I still could have kids playing basketball, and I could be sitting indoors in October rather than outdoors in October.
Yeah, but you'd be playing a lot more games.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a lot. That's a longer season.
Hundreds of more games per year.
You know what? I can't turn down that popcorn. You walk into a gym, you can't turn it down.
Yeah. So let's migrate then into the business and people and profit world. Man, there's so many risks, and I find myself doing it. I saw myself doing it last week, where I'm evaluating people in the gap rather than the gain, and thinking about like. Gary Vee talks about this all the time, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, of course.
And he gets this question like, well, what do you do when your employees don't think about your business the same way you do? And his response is nothing.
Nothing
like
at all.
Nobody should care about your business the way that you do.
No.
And so we often evaluate people, whether it's, their daily performance or annual performance or whatever, we evaluate them in the gap, what the ideal could have been rather than the improvements that they made.
Correct. And why we do that oftentimes, I think, is because their gain is actually part of our responsibility. It's part of our coaching and growth. And it's easier to evaluate them versus somebody else who they must have listened to me more, and that's why they're having more success, rather than look at where you were and look at where you are. And by the way, that is taking that personally, which also means we got to get out of our own gap and look at our own gains at the same token. Yeah. I can't tell you how many conversations that even I've had, to your point, in the last month that have been in a comparison mode. And you almost have to say, I don't want to talk about that other person. Let's make it about you.
Yeah.
And let's make it about where your growth is and where your unique ability and where your opportunities are, rather than live in the gap of, if you were just more like Johnny or Susie, I think you'd be better. Why don't you go mirror them for a while? I don't know if that's even healthy anymore.
Yeah. Well, and then when you ask an employee to goal set, are they starting to set their goals based on our leadership of them in the gap? Or are they thinking about it from a gain perspective? Like, how can I just... I was with a client the other day, and we were talking about some goals of some of their employees, and they're given these goals, and I'm like, wherever in their past behavior did you think this actually could happen? Like, I mean, that would mean that they're like 5Xing their production.
Yeah.
Like how, and I think we as leaders have to
too.
accept that responsibility a little bit, that possibly the way we've behaved, the way we've coached the person, the way we've given them feedback and evaluation causes them to want to to say that to us so that we're proud of them.
Yeah, there's as entrepreneurs, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are entrepreneurs and leaders, we can't help but be driven. And to Gary V's point, our drive can't naturally be projected and reflected upon our people that we work with, we depend on, right? That we delegate and elevate to. How do we take that same drive and create peace in their growth? Because it's impossible for somebody to grow when I'm not going to allow them the peace because I'm constantly shoving. You've seen all the pictures we see on LinkedIn all the time, the leader who pushes and the leader who gets out in front. I'm going to walk my journey. I want you to walk yours with me, but I'm not going to get behind and shove you down a path because I'm pushing you into a gap that we're never going to get out of.
Yeah. I think one of the struggles, and I may be catching you off guard a little bit on this though too, that I'm processing through, is I know they wrote the book Gap in the Gain, but then they put that concept into 10x is easier than 2x also. So how do you think with a 10x mind? And by the way, let me just summarize the idea behind 10x is easier than 2x. And we ought to do a whole episode on this book. But the idea is that if we start to think about our business or anything in life, that if we just think about 2xing something, then we can probably unpack 10 strategies where we can have incremental improvement over time to hit that 2x.
We can almost accidentally hit 2x.
Exactly. But when you start to say, I'm going to 10x something, then probably 10 out of those 10 strategies aren't going to get you there. And so the whole concept of 10x is either than 2x is it eliminates so many options in your life.
Correct.
And only leaves you with a couple to accomplish that, so it becomes easier. It's hard. But it does become an easier way to think about it. So the struggle that I have is how do I think about the gain in the context of going 10x?
Yeah, so I actually, as you say that, and what was popping in my head, because I'm a lover of this book, is really in that opening preface of the book where he talks about the Michelangelo story. And sometimes we're so worried about the gain that we don't spend time removing what's not us. And so as you talk about Michelangelo when he carved David, Pope said, how'd you do that? And he said, I looked at it and realized what wasn't David. I took away everything that wasn't David. And so we spend so much time trying to build what we want somebody to be. Sometimes it's just as easy, which makes it hard, i.e. 10x versus 2x, to remove everything you're not, everything that's not going to work. The 5x is not going to happen. And so because of that 5x opportunity that you were talking about, that person who wrote that down, what in your mind would you ever think about that? They're going to be barely 2x next year anyways. So how do we take I always call it the sun and the laser beam, this 10x sun of opportunity, which we can all go out and get sunburned, and focus that into the 1 or 2 laser beams that will cut through all the crap and get me where I want to go faster. And so that's how I look at it and think about it. I don't know if that helps you in what your question is.
No, I think it does. And we, as business owners and leaders, we have all these options that are available to us. And we're always constantly, if you're a visionary type, you're always constantly looking for the other thing that will work. And we can really screw up our workforce sometimes.
Correct.
When we're showing up every day with what if we tried this? What if we tried this? What if we tried this? Rather than taking a time out and really thinking of the big idea and the paradigm shift that might come with going 10x over 2x.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine once say, let's stop trying things and let's start mastering things.
Yeah.
We can try 10 things and we can master 2. I bet you if we master those 2, those other 8 things will either become byproducts or weren't important anyways.
Yeah.
And so I believe back to that. The gap is the, hey, y'all watch this, try things that got Micah and I in trouble over Thanksgiving, or the simplification, which is what we're not good at. Simplify it and just get great at that.
Yeah. So, well, as a way to wrap this up and to give kind of maybe a context of what to do next, I bet you didn't know this, but my first job out of college, I worked for the Olympic baseball team. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, I was the PR director. I came out of IU. I know, Purdue grads and stuff, they don't get those opportunities.
I'm not a Purdue grad.
I know you're not, but IU grads do. And so I had this opportunity. So I'm traveling for 2.5.
I hope everybody caught that. That was really good.
So I'm for like 3 years. I traveled all over the world with all these blue chip college athletes who were moving on to play Major League Baseball. Well, one year, it was the first year I was working for the organization. I was with the junior team, and we're down in Monterrey, Mexico, and a guy named Alex Rodriguez was on the team.
I've heard of him.
A-Rod, right? Everybody's
J-Lo's ex. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, everybody's heard
played
A-Rod.
baseball too.
So we're down, and I'm only 22 at the time, so I was just right out of college, and he's like a year younger than me, still in high school, or 2 years younger. And we're down working out. It was A-Rod, it was A.J. Hinch, who is the manager of the Detroit Tigers. I know you're not a baseball guy, so
No.
I'm unpacking this for you.
No.
He used to be the manager for the Houston Astros, right? So very successful guy. and we're working out, and I made this comment. I'm like, I don't see how you guys, because baseball in Florida and Oklahoma and California, it's a different game than here in Indiana. And I'm like, I don't see how you guys stand in the box, see a pitch coming, and make a decision to swing or not to swing. And Alex Rodriguez looked at me and he goes, Mike, you have it all backwards. I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, we're not making a decision to swing or not swing. We're making a decision to not swing. Because we're swinging at every pitch, and we're just holding back. And I'm like, if I had known that when I was in Little League, I'd probably be in the show.
Obviously.
Right? But I like to tell that story because it's a total paradigm shift.
It is.
It's thinking about your business, your parenting, your relationship with your spouse, whatever, in a total way that you've not thought about it before. And that's what 10X over 2X really does. And that's what helps us think about things in the gain rather than the gap.
What you just said to me is, I'm going to hit the ball, and rather than I don't want to miss.
That's right.
I don't want to make a bad choice.
Yeah.
What I heard is, I'm hitting every ball that comes here. I'll decide if I'm going to swing or not afterward. Yeah. What a great thought.
Yeah, exactly. So the takeaway that I would propose, similar to our episode on eyelid tattoos, where I kind of challenged at the end, challenge your eyelid tattoos. Let's challenge the way as business leaders that we're thinking about how we develop our people, the results that we're getting, the solutions that we're bringing to the table, and think outside the box, develop a whole new paradigm. I'm grateful that I ran across before our annual meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Because my whole attitude walking into that annual meeting is now one of celebration and how can we go do that again?
Yes.
Rather than one of we underperformed this year.
Correct. Yeah, and what you just described is, your past is now going to be your catapult rather than your hindrance. It's not your anchor. And your future self is going to become more clear because I'm going to actually work to the gain of my future self rather than try to fill a gap that I was never going to get there by myself.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Great stuff, dude.
All right. Again, you can check us out. All of our episodes drop at 1300 hours on Mondays. You can check us out on YouTube. We've got a website. You can check us out on LinkedIn as well. Lucky 13 Podcast LinkedIn page, or Josh Hauser and Mike Lantz.
Love it. Great call today. Love it.